Welcome to the Generalist, where security practitioners look beyond niches, silos, egos, and hopefully build their competence and credibility. My name is Ilya Umanskiy. So, with a bit of a delay, and I apologize for that, I decided to release this new episode of this conversation that I've been having with the industry, or with those who are willing to listen. And in this one, I want to take you back to this nagging problem of the Uvalde school shooting. Why? Because what appears to be as lack of police action, or police inaction, as it's now being blasted out in the press, is only part of the fundamental challenge that our industry and several other industries should be paying attention to. I found the interim report that was issued on the shooting to be quite to be fair, predictable, but also there's one section 4, starting on page 29, that I think for us as practitioners should be a wake-up call, because I've come to realize that psychology and psychiatry play a very significant role in at least our continual learning, because it helps understand human behavior and some of the underlying causes for malicious behavior, threat manifestations, and also early warning signs of potential threats. So this section tells us a little bit about the attacker, and it tells us the story of the attacker and his early years, that had it been, I guess, part of a more sophisticated, well-structured system, would have produced fairly clear warning signs to both those responsible for protection of assets within the school district, as well as the school administration. But even beyond that, there are some notes here within this section that speak to much greater problems. They're societal, they're the problems of parenting, they're the problems of just the infrastructure around how children are being raised and what resources are available or not available to kids. It also talks about I guess, lack of experience or competence on the part of school administrators, and most importantly, school psychologists, or let's expand that beyond school psychologists, counselors, and people who are responsible for picking up on those early warning signs of child development that later bring us to these unfathomable tragedies like the Uvalde school shooting and the many, many previous school shootings. I'll take the pages directly out of the report. I made some highlights here, but I feel like what I've highlighted here will help you do better homework, and those particularly who are engaged in consulting educational institutions, particularly primary educational institutions, can add to their arsenal of asking more probing questions of school administrators, school districts, school psychologists, and anyone who is responsible for this or building this infrastructure around behavioral early warning signs. Family and early life. The attacker was born in Fargo, North Dakota on May 16, 2004, the second child born to the mother, Uvalde native AR, and her then boyfriend, SR. The couple split shortly after the attacker's birth, and AR returned to Uvalde with the two children. The father had limited and inconsistent involvement in his children's lives from that point onward. To some, this paragraph may appear as inconsequential, but I dare suggest that you park your assumptions and just start, picking up on these nuanced signs of early developing trauma for two children, one of whom became the attacker. And the lack of family structure, lack of parental presence will become more evident as you read this section. Again, section 4 of the report, page 29, all the way through page 34. So, AR was involved in the attacker's early life, but over time, her relationship with both her children became strained. AR struggled with long history of drug use and other personal issues though her only criminal history was a 2005 misdemeanor, and it also goes to describe a couple of brushes with the law, although nothing very serious. The FBI interviewed a former girlfriend of the attacker who believed one of AR's boyfriends sexually assaulted him at an early age, but that AR didn't believe his outcry. Potential sexual assault, a mother who does not believe her child's outcries, and not only doesn't believe, but doesn't do anything about it. So then the story goes to the grandmother, who was a more present, call it a parent, a parental figure in the attacker's life, and a respected member of the Uvalde community. Matter of fact, the grandmother retired from the Uvalde School District after 27 years of service. So she became the maternal figure for the attacker and also the attacker's sister. Relatives described the attacker as shy and quiet. The committee heard testimony that he was reluctant to interact with peers because of a speech impediment. Speech impediment. Now, we can stop here, and I can ask you as a practitioner in asset protection to, particularly those who are advising schools, do you understand any sort of issues with differentiation and what differentiation is in general, and also what are some of the learning support challenges that arise in early child development? Speech happens to be one of them. So, speech impediment. Speech impediment. Poverty is not an unfamiliar circumstance in Uvalde. 86% of the children in the school district may be economically disadvantaged. Do you notice layering of different challenges that beset this mother that doesn't seem to be a very competent parent, the two children, and the general community? The attacker often wore the same clothing day after day. Records from the attacker's early school years reveal varied accounts of his character and school performance. His pre-K teacher's report described him as a pleasure to have, a wonderful student, always ready to learn. Pre-K. Please start making some of the sequential notes. And it praised his hard work and positive attitude in the classroom. Yet early assessments showed he was behind other students academically and by third grade, school officials already had identified him as at risk due to consistently poor test results. School records reveal that someone may have requested speech therapy for the attacker, and his later internet searches show he himself sought information on dyslexia. Ultimately, and this is where I drew a big exclamation point, ultimately, he received no special education services. The attacker's fourth grade year at Robb Elementary School was significant to him. The shooting took place in his former fourth grade classroom, and he discussed bad memories of fourth grade with an acquaintance just weeks beforehand. In testimony before the committee, two different narratives have emerged. The attacker's fourth grade teacher testified before the committee. Not only did she know the attacker from having been his teacher, but she was also in Robb Elementary's fourth grade building in a different classroom at the time of the attack. The teacher told the committee she knew the attacker needed extra help in her class because he claimed to be a victim of bullying. She testified that she met with the attacker's mother, AR, over the mother's concerns about bullying, and that she had promised AR that her son would have a good fourth grade year. According to the teacher, it was a good year for the attacker. She said she believed her classroom was a safe place for him, and that he made friends there. Now, members of the attacker's family, however, reported to the committee their belief that other students still bullied the attacker throughout his fourth grade school year over his stutter, clothing, and short haircut. A cousin of the attacker said she was in the same fourth grade class with him, and that a cousin of the attacker said that she was in the same fourth grade class with him, and she corroborated this version of his experience that year. She reported an incident in which another girl in the class tied the attacker's shoelaces together, resulting in him falling over and injuring his face. The family also reported their belief that some teachers also picked on the attacker and his cousin. So there seems to be some dissonance developing between what the teachers are reporting, what the school was seeing, or doing or not doing, and what the family has been observing. But neither side was, how shall I say, competent enough, aware enough, trained well enough to understand that a child is literally being passed down a very strange system without the support that he needs. Whereas it's clear that not only did the child need support, but also later he himself tried to search for information on the ways in which he could address his challenges. Records show the attacker had declining attendance, with more than 100 absences annually beginning in 2018. That's when he's already a teenager, along with failing grades and increasingly dismal performance on standardized and end-of-course exams. While Uvalde CISD, school success officers, for some reason those three words are put into quotes. Okay, do try to bring truant children back to school. Many Uvalde students have spotty attendance, and the local judicial system reportedly does not consistently enforce truancy rules. It is unclear whether any school resource officers ever visited the home of the attacker. By 2021, at age 17, the attacker had only completed the 9th grade. On October 28, 2021, Uvalde High School involuntarily withdrew him, citing poor academic performance and lack of attendance. So, early childhood developmental issues, lack of parenting, lack of family structure, left to his own devices as a developing brain, developing human being, uh, misunderstandings between family and school in terms of how he was developing as a student, as a child, potential acts of bullying against him. In the teenage years, he becomes more withdrawn and begins to skip school quite a bit, only to be dropped out of school involuntarily because of poor attendance. That is the system within which the attacker was, I guess, shaped, if you will. So if you think that this incident begins and ends with police response and the attacker's access to the school building, you're dead wrong. It started in his childhood. There were multiple warning signs, and they were ignored. They fell on deaf ears, poor competence or lack of competence, and unfortunately, lack of parental structures. All of those things make this incident far more complicated and make our job as security consultants far more complicated. So the school gives up on the kid. An ex-boyfriend of his mother described the attacker to an investigating Texas Ranger as a loner who punched holes in the walls in his room after arguments with her, the mother. By this time, the attacker's sister already had graduated and left home, and his best, perhaps only friend was living in San Francisco. The attacker had no driver's license or vehicle. Family members told the committee and other investigators that a group of the attacker's former friends jumped him early in the year. The attacker began trying to teach himself boxing and mixed martial arts with a punching bag in his room at home. I tend to think that there are a few signs here where the attacker himself was trying to remedy his situation. Unfortunately, nobody took care to understand and process what the attacker was going through to help him get out of the cycle of self-harm and also plotting to harm others. But you can see how layer after layer of neglect caused the attacker to basically feel like he's withdrawn from the society, like nobody cares. In mid-2021, his relationship with the girlfriend, later interviewed by the FBI, ended. She described the attacker as lonely and depressed, constantly teased by friends who called him a school shooter. There's a significant description of the attacker's online activity, where there's many signs of his disdain for society, his, I guess, withdrawn attitude, if you will. But what I find in this story is that if we're simply going to be assessing this incident from how well police training worked in terms of active shooter response, we're not going to be addressing the root cause. We're not going to be helping schools and school districts to protect children from the angle where they need to be protected. I wonder to what extent the individuals and groups responsible for asset protection in schools interact frequently and meaningfully with those responsible for child development, learning support, special services, because it seems like the infrastructure is not well set up. If it's there, it's just definitely not well thought through. Early warning signs are very, very clear, even in the excerpts that I've read to you. So, what's the moral of the story, if you will, right? Moral of the story is, to me, that we failed a group of children who died and the teachers who perished. We failed the attacker as a human being because we allowed for for his environment to get progressively more grim, and there was no early intervention in play. Now, there are ways in which we, as asset protection practitioners, could do better. We can't work in our silos to say, "Oh, I'm only responsible for asset protection of the school." Um, and by assets, you'd probably think about, okay, I need to put in school resource officers, I need to lock the doors, I need to put video surveillance, I need to put gun detection and shot detection systems. All of those things are fine, excuse me, for an incident response or preparing for incident response, if they're done well. Okay, and that's another topic we can cover at a different time. But where people in asset protection should pay far more attention is by interaction with those who are responsible for early intervention, early childhood development as children enter the school system, and to understand what is the school doing to look after kids with differences, what kind of services are being provided to them, and what are some of the social conditions that surround children that attend the school environment. You could see here that there was lack of parenting. There was disconnect between the attacker and his mother, and certainly grandmother, as much as she tried, probably didn't get through to the attacker. There was significant periods of depression, loneliness, again, being neglected, bullying, that contributed to this human being turning onto the path of violence. Early warning signs, early treatment, early intervention likely would have prevented all this. And we wouldn't have to discuss whether Uvalde Police Department or School District Police were competent or incompetent in executing their duties. They probably wouldn't have had to address this incident if early warning signs were carefully monitored and addressed. Humans were children would, or in this particular case, one child would have been helped earlier in his life. So I do support that the idea of retraining, increasing training for the police, but that's too late in the game. It's too late because police will react to incidents. They won't be able to think in terms of protection of assets and preventative strategies. It falls on those in the asset protection industry to look for prevention far earlier in this cycle of development, of student development, child development, and work with people like counselors, school admin, psychologists to help facilitate, help push for addressing early intervention for children who are flagged to be at risk. That also further extends to working with families and monitoring how parenting takes place, not to help parent, but to, I guess, create more of a community feel between the schools and the parent community, to engage in dialogue, to help with parenting strategies, to help parents and educate them on early warning signs. When should they be worried, and when should they contact specialists and professionals in early intervention to address their children's needs. To date, there are many parents that live in denial of that their kids have anything wrong with them. Okay, that's something that can be overcome, not easily, but overcome if the system works better. So I think the final point here that I'll make is that it's very important that we don't forget that all of these incidents were preventable, including the Uvalde shooting. And they're preventable if you simply look at the facts of the situation, facts of the incident and what preceded the incident. Are we doing good enough job as practitioners in asset protection of expanding our horizons and going out and speaking with practitioners in other fields that are also part of this larger school and educational system to help join forces and apply more preventative measures, more monitoring of early signs for these types of potential threats. Let me know what you think. I'm sorry for the slightly more lengthy discussion here. Certainly welcome any comments and questions. If we don't discuss these things, if we don't challenge ourselves, our beliefs, I don't know how far we'll go. For now, the situation is fairly grim. Lots of things need to change. Probably most focus right now is on how the incident happened, how police responded, and there's lots to be said about that. But the root cause of the incident is not in the attacker approaching the building. That's not the root cause. He grew up being neglected and being shunned by the system that was supposed to offer him more support. Those are my 2 cents. I wish for you to stay well, and until the next one, take care.